The story begins inside one of the most secure military facilities in the country, where decisions of war and peace are made every day and where every officer entering must pass layers of clearance. On a stormy evening when the atmosphere inside the war room was already tense because of an incoming threat signal, no one noticed the silent entry of a woman in uniform whose presence would change the course of the night and expose truths that senior officials never imagined. She walked in with calm, steady steps, her eyes scanning every blinking screen, every satellite feed, every anxious face sitting around the massive circular table. Her name badge read Lieutenant Commander Elise Ward, but what no one in that room knew was that this woman carried a classified identity known only to the Department of Naval Special Warfare. She was not just a lieutenant commander but an undercover Navy SEAL attached to a shadow unit whose existence was debated more than confirmed. Minutes after her entry, Admiral Harris, the man in charge of the entire coastal defense operation, slammed his hand on the table, frustrated that intelligence was late. He was aggressive, short-tempered, and known for dismissing junior officers without hesitation. When he saw Elise standing near the tactical map, he demanded to know who she was and who authorized her presence. His voice echoed through the room, drawing every eye toward her. She responded politely with operational calm, explaining that she was sent by Naval Intelligence to brief the room on a critical data breach. The Admiral, already stressed and losing control, assumed she was another paper officer, interfering in combat planning. He stepped toward her, his anger rising with each breath, accusing her of incompetence and interference. She remained completely unfazed, maintaining military bearing. That calmness further provoked him, and in a moment of uncontrolled aggression he struck her across the face with the back of his hand. The entire room fell silent as the sound of the impact echoed against metal walls. Officers froze, screens blinked, drones hovered, live feeds streamed, but no one moved. Even Elise's hair barely shifted from the blow. She stood there unshaken, looking straight at the Admiral with eyes that did not reflect anger or pain but something far more intimidating: absolute control. Before the Admiral could speak again, a rear admiral at the opposite end of the table suddenly recognized her name on the badge, and his face drained of color. He rushed toward the Admiral, whispering urgently that Elise Ward was not what she appeared. The Admiral dismissed it until the rear admiral added the one line that made every senior officer in the room sit upright. "Sir, she is Tier 0. The Admiral's eyes widened with fear because only one category of operators was referred to as Tier 0. Navy SEALs trained for missions that never appeared on reports, not even in classified archives. Elise stepped forward and introduced herself properly, revealing that she had been deployed on 42 black missions across 6 countries, missions so sensitive that even the President was briefed only after they were completed. She explained that she was authorized to take command of cyber defense for that night and that the data breach she came to report was already inside the war room's communication system. As her words sank in, the Admiral realized that not only had he assaulted a covert SEAL officer, but he had endangered the entire National Defense Command by delaying critical intel. Elise ignored his shock and immediately activated the secure device she carried. A holographic map expanded across the table, showing a foreign submarine drone swarm approaching the coastline. Silence turned into controlled panic. Elise analyzed sonar patterns, explaining that the enemy was attempting to disrupt the naval grid through undersea drones disguised as commercial research pods. She quickly coordinated with a remote cyber team linking the war room to a classified underwater surveillance network. In minutes she identified the signature of the hostile drones, revealing that the attack was not an ordinary tactical move but an attempt to blind the United States Navy during a larger global operation unfolding thousands of miles away. Officers began reporting new threats appearing across the Pacific. Elise issued commands with precision, telling destroyers where to redirect their torpedoes, instructing cyber teams to cut specific communication lines, and guiding aircraft to intercept the enemy swarm at exact coordinates. The Admiral stood frozen, unable to process how effortlessly she took over. Moments earlier he thought she was an inexperienced junior officer, yet she now commanded an operation more complex than anything in his 30-year career. As the situation intensified, Elise noticed that the breach was deeper than expected. Someone inside the facility had uploaded an encrypted key enabling the enemy drones to navigate undetected. That meant there was a mole within the war room itself. She ordered an immediate lockdown and military police sealed every door. Officers exchanged nervous looks because nobody expected a traitor among them. Elise accessed restricted server logs using codes no one recognized. Then she found a recently used terminal linked to the communications officer sitting quietly near the back. Elise walked toward him, slowly analyzing his movements, his breathing, his refusal to make eye contact. She spoke to him in a calm voice, asking him to explain why an unapproved data packet had been transmitted from his station 2 hours earlier. Before he could respond, she leaned in and quietly informed him that she had already traced the signal to a foreign handler. The officer panicked, reached for something under his desk, but Elise reacted faster than anyone could see. In a single motion she pinned his hand to the table, twisted the hidden device from his grip, and restrained him with a tactical move that displayed years of special operations mastery. Military police dragged the mole away as he screamed threats and foreign phrases, confirming Elise's suspicion that he was an infiltrated spy. With the mole removed, Elise intensified the defense protocols. The enemy drones were now 3 minutes from entering the restricted naval zone. Elise requested permission to take full tactical control. The Admiral, unable to speak from shock, nodded silently. Elise initiated countermeasures, activating deep-sea mines, remotely redirecting torpedo tubes, and engaging submarine units stationed hundreds of miles away. The war room watched in awe as she fought a war across the ocean from a single console. The first wave of drones was neutralized, then the second, but the third wave was larger, more advanced, and equipped with counter-jamming systems. Elise called for air support, ordering 2 stealth aircraft to break formation and dive low enough to release electromagnetic disruptors. The move worked temporarily, but not enough to stop the remaining drones. Realizing that traditional tactics were failing, she designed a plan on the spot, a maneuver so risky that senior officers questioned if it was even legal. She proposed flooding a segment of the communication trench, making the drones rise to avoid electrical interference, exposing them to direct attack. The Admiral finally regained his voice, trying to argue that the move could endanger Allied vessels, but Elise countered that the alternative was losing the coastal defense grid entirely. The President was contacted for emergency authorization. It was granted immediately. Elise led the operation herself, coordinating every vessel, every aircraft, and every submarine involved. She stood in the center of the war room, her voice steady, her mind sharp, her presence commanding absolute focus. The plan worked. As the trench flooded, the drones were forced upward, revealing themselves to the destroyers waiting above. Within moments, a barrage of precision torpedoes launched from 3 different directions. Explosions lit up the screens as the hostile swarm was destroyed almost simultaneously. Relief swept through the war room, but Elise was not done. She informed the officers that the drone attack had been only the first layer of a multi-stage operation. The enemy intended to exploit the chaos to infiltrate the naval satellite system. If that happened, every ship, every aircraft, and every underwater defense system would be blind. She immediately accessed the encrypted satellite channels using signatures only her unit possessed. Her fingers moved rapidly over the keyboard, bypassing traps designed by some of the world's most dangerous cyber units. As the digital battlefield raged, Elise remained composed, analyzing code strings in real time. She isolated the malicious algorithm, then created a counter-worm that not only neutralized the attack but traced it back to the foreign server used to launch the operation. The war room watched as she executed a counter-strike, overwhelming the enemy's command center with their own redirected data. Their satellite manipulation attempt collapsed within seconds. Elise finally exhaled as the last red alert faded from the screens. The room erupted in applause from officers who had doubted her minutes earlier. But she simply nodded and continued working, analyzing residual threats and ensuring that no hidden malware remained in the system. Admiral Harris stepped forward, ashamed of his earlier behavior. He apologized formally, but Elise brushed it aside, explaining that personal conflicts were irrelevant during national emergencies. Still, he insisted on acknowledging his mistake, saying that he had judged her on rank rather than ability. Elise reminded him that the Navy's greatest strength was the skill of its operators, not their position on a chart. Her words struck deeply because everyone in the room knew she was right. When the crisis ended and the war room quieted, Elise received a secure call instructing her to report to Naval Special Warfare Command for debriefing. She prepared to leave, but before she stepped through the doors, the Admiral saluted her with full respect, something he had not done for any officer in decades. Elise returned the salute and walked out, disappearing into the classified corridors from which she came. Most officers in the room would never see her again, and many would only learn later that she belonged to a covert division known unofficially as Phantom SEALs, a unit reserved for missions where failure was not an option. As she walked down the dimly lit hallway, she recalled the moment the Admiral struck her and how that single action exposed the deeper weakness in the chain of command, the tendency to underestimate quiet strength. She hoped that the war room would remember the lesson long after she was gone. Outside the facility, rain poured heavily, masking her exit. She stepped into a black tactical vehicle and disappeared into the night, heading toward her next mission, one that would remain classified for decades. The war room gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but the officers who had witnessed her skill would talk about her for years, comparing her composure to legends of naval special warfare. Some even requested new training protocols inspired by her strategies that night. The Admiral became one of the strongest supporters of including more covert operatives in high command briefings. He often admitted in private that the moment he realized who Elise truly was, he felt fear, not because she could retaliate but because he understood how deeply he had misjudged her capability and dedication. Elise meanwhile continued to operate from the shadows, preventing threats long before the world ever knew they existed. Her encounter in the war room remained classified, but within elite circles it became an example of why respect, discipline, and humility remain essential in military leadership. The night she saved the coastline was not remembered publicly, but the impact of her actions shaped defense policies for years to come. The story ends with Elise preparing for another deployment, her identity concealed, her achievements unspoken, and her strength defined not by recognition but by duty, service, and the silent code followed by every Navy SEAL who serves without expecting the world to know their name.